We'll get ready during the intro.
If you want to start or scale your property development business to 8 figures and beyond, then you're in the right place. This is the Property Experts Podcast with Ben Richards and Jack Jiggins, two serial entrepreneurs bringing weekly insights from our award-winning businesses. In these podcasts, you'll learn how we found, funded and delivered over £80 million worth of property in the last 6 years, with templates you can use, deal analysis and deep dive discussions that will help you build your businesses successfully. We hope you'll enjoy.
Hello, welcome everyone. Happy Friday. It's like the 47th day of the year that it's rained, but we're bringing you some sunshine. And as always, we are bringing top tips, strategies, focus, ideas that you can implement into your businesses, service-based businesses, construction businesses, property development businesses, to hopefully grow and scale this year. We've been doing this now for 3 years, and a lot of our followers are loving the insights and value that we give each week. This episode is recorded on the 20th of Feb for podcast listeners, and we'll jump straight into the agenda and what we're going to be going through. We're going to start off with how you can secure more deals and creative structure to do so. We're going to be talking through £3.5 million worth of steel delivered to one of our sites. We're going to be talking the difference in contracts, whether that's conditional, unconditional, delayed completions, and such the like. We're going to be talking about legacy planning, bit morbid, but everyone should be doing some legacy planning. I think Ben's going to share some insights on what that could look like. Earlier, I was in Twickenham. I saw half of the England team and also the Irish coach, but that wasn't why I was there. We're going to be talking about crypto and how that may be merging into our life in property development. We're going to be going into the purpose behind top companies. If you have a business partner and you're not doing this structure, I can almost guarantee this will save you huge amounts of savings when it comes to moving capital around. Aura are looking for a part-time sales assistant. We're going to be showing the love and care that we have for ChatGPT and photo editing. Sorry for any CGI editors out there. And then last but not least, before we go to the Q&A, we're going to be going into our zero discount. That's it. Hi, Ben.
Nice. Hello. And for those that don't tune in regularly, we are Ben Richards and Jack Jiggins of XP Property, and our property development and investment business aims to deliver 1,000 homes and £1 billion worth of property in the UK. And we do that by collaborating with trusted investors. We've been doing this now for 8 years. We're pretty much a tenth of the way there. We've delivered a lot of stock, and we've seen a lot of good and bad in the industry. But people tune into us because we are very ambitious. We actually had a meeting with one of our team this week who said we are the most ambitious sort of owners of a business that he's ever worked for or seen. So we are ambitious. We run numerous businesses across the construction, property and design space, an architectural practice, a surveying business, property investment and development business, HMO management company, and various other ventures alongside that. We're transparent. This is one of the ways in which we are transparent with our podcast that we are live every week on a Friday afternoon with. And we are very creative, and hopefully you will get a sense of that as we progress through some of the topics and the agenda points today. We work with, go on, do you want to take this one?
I was going to say, to grow and scale our business, we partner with investing partners. We like to think that we can pretty much do everything when it comes to the sourcing, the acquiring, the debt funding, the structure, the design, the delivery and exit. And we collaborate with people that might not have the time, or alternatively the expertise, and they might want to learn the expertise, or alternatively just want to come along for the journey and leave us to what we do, and collaborate with from a funding perspective. Because we're so active across the group, we typically do have quite a lot on. So if you are sat there thinking, maybe not today, maybe next year, or you want to get into property, please do reach out to us, because we can talk about how it may work well ahead of it needing to be able to work. It typically takes a few months to get an investor sort of onboarded and prepped ready for an oncoming deal that we have. But to go into a little bit more detail about what that might look like, we have pretty much any given time permitted development conversion schemes available. Ticket sizes are between 1 and 3 million investment. We're happy to do, by the way, we're happy to do any of these collaborations on either a loan structure or an equity structure. Our social housing portfolio, we've been working very heavily on sort of reperforming this, as it were, recently. And we're very keen to find a partner to grow that portfolio. We also have quite a unique, almost like buyback, buyout opportunity in one of our stabilized assets that's income producing, which might be applicable for a SaaS pension or a pension investment, which is a mixed use site that's fully tenanted in just outside Reading. And I think that's it on the list, but there's always bits and bobs throwing away. Actually, there's another slide. That's why I thought. And also, we have XP Surveys. So to give you a bit of context, XP Surveys was predominantly Ben's brainchild. About sort of 6-7 years ago, we pulled together a business plan. This has now grown into its very self-sufficient, organic, growing business. I think last year we grew 30% on revenue, and that's been a common occurrence across the years that we've been trading. And we've now believed that we've proven the concept of the business model and set the landscape of what a forecasted growth plan can look like. So fairly unique, because I call this more of like a startup investment, and it would be amazing if any of our listeners that are real estate focused in real estate, but then equally there may be listeners out there that might be interested in potentially EIS investment or start investing in our first raise for our startup business. So we can share more details on our surveying business. We've got ambitions to grow this and keep growing it to a national delivery business, and we believe we've got so many USPs that set us aside from everything else in the market. To give you an example for that, we're the only company, I believe, still today that have an online quotation tool to quote jobs, not just for measured building surveys, but also for topographical surveys, streamlining that process, meaning we need less overheads and meaning the client gets a cheaper product. That's just a snapshot of one thing, but we've got plenty of other things. If you had watched our episode 3 weeks ago, we also shared the portal. But yeah, if you're interested in something slightly different to bricks and mortar and real estate and more startup focused, hit us up. We'd love to have a chat.
Yeah, super exciting growth plans for that business. So yeah, if you do want to be part of that, let us know.
Cool. Kicking off on my topic. So this actually came off the back of a mentoring session this week. And I have talked about it, but it probably was a few years ago. And what I would like for the listeners to think about is typically when you're transacting on anything, whether that's buying a coffee in a shop, or whether it's buying a weekly shop, or whether it's buying a car, it's typically driven around price. Typically people look at the mileage of the car, how many years old it is, how many previous owners, and then that is the base point of the pricing. It's extremely transactional, so it's fairly clean. But with real estate, you can make it messy to benefit both parties. There's so many moving factors that you can focus on. And this is what I was trying to sort of communicate in the mentoring session. And I thought it would be useful for our listeners as a freebie to sort of run through that and to help you secure more deals. Because typically people say, I can't get the numbers to work, or the house is overpriced, or the seller wants too much money, or it might have been worth 500 during the COVID boom, but it's probably now worth 450. I can't get a deal done. If you remove the price point part and focus on the terms of the deal and implore creativity onto how it's structured, the price point can be completely outweighed. So I'll give you an example of a deal that is relative to this. I actually put a deal on the screen, but I'm actually going to talk about another deal because I use this other case study and I think it works really well. So our development, which is in Colney Hatch Lane, North London, is a large set of semi-detached houses which were converted badly into converted into HMOs, but then sort of came in a bad state of repair. And the price point was 2.35 million. That's the best price that we could get to, and that's the lowest value that the seller was willing to accept. Ben and I actually thought that that was probably overpriced just to get in and buy that site. And we're very thankful that we negotiated the terms of the deal to benefit us. And I'll come on to why that is more significant and beneficial. So 2.35 million purchase price, that's what the seller wants, and that's what we will pay the seller. But we negotiated two other things which made that purchase price significantly less in cost, because we pulled it from a different area of cost and pushed it into the price point. Now, let me explain how that works. If we bought the site for 2.35 million, we'd have to go through the rigmarole and the holding costs of planning. we needed to get planning on the site, and we actually managed to get planning for 9 apartments. And to essentially do that, it took 18 months in time. So if you picture, if we bought the site on a bridging product at a blended cost of 10%, and let's say we're leveraging, 1.6 million pounds worth of debt, plus some, maybe if we've got capital in the deal ourselves, that's basically costing us around 200k a year in finance costs to hold that site while we get the planning. It took us 18 months. So that's essentially a £300,000 finance roughly saving if we agree a conditional purchase to planning. A conditional purchase means we exchange on the site, but we don't complete on the site until we get the planning we wanted. So if we look at that 18-month period, we're now actually getting the planning approval on the vendor's finance time, which means we technically, in how we structured it, have saved about £300,000. Second to that, agreeing that deal, we managed to structure that the vendor would also give us a £350,000 loan, interest-free, for the period and the duration of the project. So now we bought the site, we've been delivering it. I'd probably say end to end, we're probably looking at 2 to 3 years. So let's take 3 years by the time we've got the last unit exited. If we put that cash in ourselves, and let's assume again quite a modest return, 10% on that equity for ourselves, that would work out about £35,000 per year. So if you round that up to about almost a 3-year project, that's £100,000. So now adding up both of those finance costs on how we structure the deal, that's a £400,000 saving just on how we've negotiated the deal. So by the time we come to the end of it, even though we paid 2.35 million, the actual net cost, because we've pulled the structure to benefit us in certain ways, has saved us £400,000. We're technically now buying the site for 1.9 million. So as you can imagine, that would have probably been a really good transactional price to get the deal done and get the site bought and delivered. But the material cost of where those costs fall elsewhere is an example of how the terms and the creativity behind the negotiation is super, super, super important. Sometimes almost even more important. I've had deals where we've paid more than others think they can pay, but how we've structured it has enabled us to offset that purchase price against other things that we would have incurred if it was structured differently. So this house actually in the bottom right image, if you can see, is a project that we're buying in Central Suites. Similar to that, we agreed a conditional purchase. That purchase has taken 18 months. That's a time that we're not waiting on our own finance costs, eroding the profit margin to get the planning consent. Then we get the planning consent, then we crack on and buy it. So what I would hope you guys can think is when you get to a point on your spreadsheet where you go, they expect too much, the price point is too high, what you can always think about is how else can we structure this? Can we borrow vendor finance? Can we delay the purchase? Can we add a condition? Can we offer a deferred consideration? So we pay X now and pay Y later. Creativity is more important getting deals over the line than anything else. And that's certainly something that rings true.
Tidy. Hopefully there's loads of good nuggets in there for everyone to take away about how to negotiate and get the best price and terms that you can. There's loads of stuff like this. If you look back through some of these episodes shown on the screen, for those that are tuning in on podcast, season 3, episode 38, episode 47, way back when, that's probably now 3 years old. And season 3, episode 12, there's some really good top tips from Jack again on negotiation in those. So go back and watch those. Before we jump into more stuff, if you are tuning into this, please do like, subscribe, comment, follow, review. All that good stuff really helps to get this podcast out much further and bring value to more and more people. So please do that now. If you're tuning in, don't do anything other than that for the next 2 seconds. And if you want to listen to this on audio format, some people aren't aware that this is recorded live in video format on YouTube and various other places, but we then repurpose the video format into audio formats across Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all those other places, and launch it on Monday at 5 a.m. ready for your start of the week. So if you're an audio listener, go head over to Spotify or Apple and make sure you subscribe and follow us on that platform. Cool. A bit of an update on St Andrew's Court in Thame. This was the mixed-use site that we're halfway through. So we've reshuffled around a couple of commercial office users in that building. We're selling selling that commercial piece of the business of the property as we speak, and should complete on that in the next month or so. We've completed the phase 1 works, which is 9 units, and we've sold all 9 of those units. And phase 2 is now well underway and due for completion summer this year. And this week was a big milestone. We'd been waiting 2 months, really. There was huge delays on the site because of this delay to the steel work. But as you can see from the images, on the back of that flatbed, there are 3.5 tons of steelwork that is going up in the roof to allow us to open up the space and basically get 2 penthouse 2 beds up in the roof space. So very valuable steel in itself, but even more valuable when it's actually installed and allows us to remodel that area. We've added loads of dormers. We've got some inset terraces, which create some private amenity space. This really long beam is 750 kgs in itself and is over 8 meters long, which I didn't quite realize we had a beam that was quite that big, but fundamentally it's needed. Yeah, over this week and early next, all of those steels will be installed. All of that steel work will be ready and allow our contractors to start partitioning the loft level and finishing off the dormer windows just in time as the weather gets a lot better. So yeah, big week this week. And they're making really good progress on the ground floor and first floor. This steelwork's now going to allow them to really crack on with that top floor and start to see that shaping up. So yeah, bit of an update on Thame. On to negotiation and more specifically around contracts and the difference
from mentoring session. Yeah. So I sometimes worry if we're repeating stuff from previous episodes, but I don't think we've touched on this for a while. So if you are watching on YouTube, which by the way, I think is the best platform to watch this on, but thank you anyway for Spotify listeners. I know it's good traffic background noise to update you on the woes and ways of property development. But if you can see on the right hand side, you can actually see a draft offer letter that we pull together typically. We love doing this technique, which is called a dual offer. So almost like a dueling pistol dual offer. The reason we do this is because sometimes when you're negotiating the terms of a deal, you don't know whether someone's money motivated, which typically means they're prepared and less prepared to take time and less time motivated, or whether they're terms motivated. They need it done ASAP. Hence why an auctioneer, someone selling in an auctioneer has speed, but they typically take a haircut on the value. The dual offer is where you offer 2 things. You basically say, I can offer you an unconditional value of X or a conditional value subject to X, Y, and Z, a delayed completion or whatever it may be, of B, and that of Y. And that sort of A and B offer enables you the opportunity to see which one the vendor is more inclined to renegotiate or take. And the reason we do this is because sometimes you don't know their motives. Sometimes it may be the difference between you and another bidder. If you've ever thought, oh, I can only buy that if I buy it with planning, and then someone comes in with a really cheeky low unconditional offer, why don't you submit an unconditional offer too, where it does work for you? Sometimes the cheeky offer is a little bit like a slap in the face to some vendors when they see it, but it only makes your conditional offer look even better. So we love doing this dual offer process. They're basically 2 levels which would be happy to proceed with something. And it enables you to, either way of the motivation of the seller, try and foster a deal that works. Now, I'm going to explain what the difference is between, essentially the difference between a conditional, unconditional and a delayed completion, because that was a question we were running through with the mentee this week. So starting off with actually unconditional. Unconditional is not necessarily saying you're buying, sold as seen. You still have the opportunity to, I would recommend submitting into subject to legal searches, surveys, and keep it as fairly open as you can. that can still be an unconditional offer. It means that there's certain things that you need to do, certain typical acquisition conveyancing or surveys that you need to carry out, but you're not conditioning the acquisition on a third factor like planning or access or agreeing the neighboring plot or whatever it may be. So that's an unconditional bid. That's typically what you would see in house sales. That's how we buy our HMOs. We typically don't have a condition. We're not in Article 4 direction, so we don't need to condition it to planning. We typically bid up to 6 beds allowance, so we can do that under permitted development. So an unconditional bid is keeping it fairly straightforward, but that still doesn't mean you can't, if there's something that detrimental comes out during the conveyancing or the searches or even surveys, you can still pull out. Like that, there's if you don't know what you don't know, and if that seller hasn't sold that property for 30 years and there's actually a stream running underneath there and it's subsiding, there's no reason why an unconditional bid could not be withdrawn from. So that's an unconditional bid. Second to that is a conditional bid. So you condition the acquisition to something. And a lot of people automatically think this is purely just planning. It's not. You can condition it to anything. You could condition the purchase of a building subject to winning the lottery if you really wanted. Obviously, the seller wouldn't have to accept that because it's a pretty finite niche condition, but your conditions can be anything. Conditions could be planning, access, agreeing a neighboring property. It could be a condition to vacant possession. It could be many things. And the beauty of the conditional contract is you de-risk that element of the deal. So let me give you an example. If a site is worth £1 million and you unconditionally offer £1 million, but the site with planning, full planning, would be worth 1.5, there's no reason you can't share that upside with the seller if it enables you to get the deal over the line. So you could bid either an unconditional bid of £1 million and you take the risk of running the planning yourself, or you could say, I'll buy the site, but I want planning, satisfactory planning approved, and I'm happy to pay £1.4 million for it, for an example. So that is the example of a conditional contract. It allows you to get the contract exchange, which means you're legally obliged to buy the site if that condition comes into your satisfaction. And it means that no one else can come in and take it off you. If you agree handshake and say, let me get the planning and then I'll buy it, there's no reason they can't redact from that position and sell it themselves. So that is a conditional contract. Conditional contracts have to have a long stop date. We have noticed that what we typically negotiate is agree timeframes for you to do things, not to hear back. So what I mean by that is, in a conditional contract, if you want to submit planning on this £1 million building that will be worth 1.5, 10 flats as a conversion, I would condition in the contract that you have 6 months to submit the application, and there's a 2-year long stop date, for an example, but the long stop can be extended if you're in appeal or you're in a process. The reason we put stipulations in the contract for timeframes is because vendors really like to see that you're actually cracking on with it and not just wasting their time. But that can bite you in the arse if you agree, for example, that you will have planning approved in 6 months because you're not in control of the council and the planning process. So always make sure that the conditions in the contract of a conditional contract are only things that you can control, and keep it open-ended for things that you can't, because you can't control them. That's a conditional contract. And then last but not least, delayed completion. Delayed completion is not a conditional contract. A delayed completion is typically an unconditional contract where you just have longer between exchange and completion. If you exchange and you have a delayed completion of 12 months, it doesn't really matter what you're doing, whether it's planning or, trying to win the lottery or whatever it may be, as I mentioned. It's more focused around you having a period of time between exchange and completion. My argument is, if you are going to try and agree a delay completion, you might as well go push for a conditional contract, because it does get you an element of get out if you need to. And what you have to always consider when you're negotiating these contracts is to make sure that you communicate with the seller. You don't make profit on deals that you waste people's time. Profit is made at the tail end of the project when it's successful. So it's not in your interest to lead people down the garden path. Hopefully, if you're an honest and striving developer to build a reputation in the area. So these things can be negotiated. We've had conditional contracts run for 24 months. We've had uncon contracts that we've got done super quickly or need a bit longer. We've got delayed completions that have run for a year. So why not negotiate it? See if you can. And if you are doing a conditional contract or a delayed completion, I would massively encourage you to try and get the exchange fee as low as possible to complement you spending money in the process of getting the thing bought, essentially. So the previous project that I showed you on the terms versus money slide, we exchanged for £5,000. Now, that's because it's just going to be sat there for 18 months, not really adding any value, when we'd rather focus on getting the consent and the condition eradicated as soon as possible. It also means you haven't got a cash flow, a huge amount, 10% of some sites is a huge amount of money to just sit in a solicitor's account. And actually, if the planning doesn't come in, you get that back because it's a condition to the contract. So I'd highly recommend, with conditional contracts and delay completions, try and bring that exchange fee down as much as possible, £5,000, or, I prefer saying monetary amounts, because if you say 0.002% of the purchase value, it doesn't come across that well in negotiation. If you say, look, I'm risking £5,000 here, I'm going to put that in, sometimes it's actually okay to get the deal over the line.
Cool. Good stuff. Hopefully that's useful for people. On to point number 4, which is about legacy planning. I had a good conversation with Akash, who's the guy on the left in this image. He's part of the Property Entrepreneur kind of network. Ultimately, everyone needs to be thinking about this type of thing. Legacy planning isn't just for, later in life when you've built a portfolio and now need to think about kind of what you do with it. You need to be setting up your structure from day one to make sure that it is, protected from an insurance perspective. It makes sense to look at all of the wider things within your, both your businesses and your personal life. So if you've got properties in your personal name, then you're going to need some life insurance to kind of help out with that. Or if you've got a portfolio within your businesses, that's also relevant. And the main reason that I'm looking at this is ultimately, I have a family now. I want to make sure that that family is protected, and that I'm doing what I need to be doing to make sure that there is succession planning around all of the things that we're doing. This is super important, and you only really see the detrimental impacts of this when it goes wrong and potentially you're no longer here. So you don't want to push all of that stress, all of that pressure on your partner. You need to be joined up in your thinking and put it into practice now. So what is the black box? The black box is basically the name of the legacy planning business that Akash runs. I had a really good conversation with him this week around what we currently have in place, myself and my partner, and what else is potentially missing. So he offers a half an hour, 45-minute kind of review of your current position, picks out all of the holes that need potentially filling, and he does that based on the protection pyramid, which is what is on screen for those that are looking at it now. So you've got personal protection, which is basically kind of anything that happens before death, things like critical illness cover and key man insurance if you're if it's you in the business alone, and then you've got the rest of the pyramid, which is basically life after death. You've got family, home, how is that protected? How is the income protected for your spouse, your partner, your family? And then 4, which is your inheritance tax and obligations there. And it sort of dawned on me really with the conversation with Akash around inheritance tax that fundamentally, as soon as you die, there is a liability. It's not a case of, like with anything else, you have an asset, you sell the asset, make a gain, and therefore there is a tax on that gain. Inheritance tax doesn't care about the gain. It cares about basically the assets. So you could have a huge liability with your property portfolio, your business, without actually having sold or made a gain yourself, and that's a huge burden for your family to bear, who will be the ones picking up the pieces on that. So yeah, it was enlightening. I think that everyone needs to really go away and think about this type of thing. Putting a will in place for one. The amount of people I speak to who don't even have a will in place to have a bit of control over their estate, over their portfolio, over their businesses and how it's run. If you've got a partnership, like Jack and I have with the business, does the shareholders agreement contain elements of protection around what happens in the event that something, touch wood, sort of terrible happens? Is it protected? What happens? Is it a case of my wife stepping into my role? She doesn't want that. She doesn't want to be running a property investment business. She doesn't want to be running an architectural practice. So what provisions are there in those contracts, those shareholders agreements, the businesses that you run? What protection is there to help either pass on those shares, put an insurance policy in place to effectively have enough money to kind of transfer those shares or buy potentially shares from your business partner if the opposite happens? Basically, you need to be thinking about these things now, and the goal of the black box is to effectively have a one place where everything is stored, so that if the worst does happen, God forbid, your family know where things are kept, where things are stored, where you have bank accounts, what structures you have in place, what your net assets are, what's all of that stuff basically kept in one place. And as you progress through life, every year you'll review this, and you'll have a black box 1.0, black box 2.0, black box 3.0, and your things might, your life might change. You might have another kid that you have to think about and make provisions for, etc. So I think this section was really about just getting you thinking about the future and protecting the hard work and the assets and the stuff that you've built over however long. And if you do want to book in a 45-minute session, you can DM me or email me. I can pass on Akash's details, and he would be more than happy to run through your situation personally and how he can help. A bit morbid, but
Akash actually did some mortgages for me back in the day.
Yeah, so he is actually co-owner of On Point Mortgages.
Yeah, 8-9 years ago, he probably did a couple of mortgages.
So he's still obviously got his fingers and toes in the mortgage pie, and obviously sort of life insurance and things fall straight out of that, and that's really his background, that kind of insurance and protection. So hence the black box business.
Love it. Very good. Cool. Twickenham site tour. So I mentioned I saw some celebrities heading down for the rugby tomorrow, but I also saw two other celebrities. Both are shorter than me. Stuart's a couple of inches shorter than me, and Ryan's a few foot shorter than me. I'm only winding Stuart up. He's actually taller than me, and he's messaged me saying he's listening, so I'm just trying to wind him out. But I shot over to Twickenham earlier today. This is actually the photo, if you can see it, stood outside a pretty incredible prominent position bank, which used to be a HSBC, with a completely curved facade that wraps around like basically the main sort of area of the retail space of like the town of Twickenham. Stuart bought this site, I think, just over a year ago. Got resi consent to convert the uppers, and he's already got a let on the ground floor with a dentist that's moving in and doing a significant fit out. But Stuart's off skiing tomorrow, and I think he wanted to show the sort of, I suppose, progress of the site. He's pretty much finished the flats on the top floor. They're just needing flooring and a little bit of decorating doing. And as always, really good to walk around other people's sites. Really good finish, really good spec. So there's a bit of context with Stuart, who I co-run the Ground Up podcast with, and Ryan and Dorian. We had a walk around. He talked everyone through the site. I actually had to come back for this live, believe it or not. So I cut things off early. So sorry, Stu. But it was amazing to see. I think, tidy site. His ops obviously know what they're doing. It's been a bit of a pig to deliver because there's no walls that are straight. And that is because you're dealing with essentially like a half semicircle building that's crammed into really tight access around the rear. Something that might be useful for our listeners is it's a Grade 2 listed bank, and it needed a full. It was basically stripped out before it was sold, and he's averaged about 180 all in for his fit out to generate these flats, and that's him controlling the construction. So hopefully that's useful for some. But cool to see the site. He's done really well to land a lease on the ground floor. I think the ground floor alone will value up similar to what he paid for the building. So a tidy little deal. He's planning on sitting on it long term and holding, which probably wouldn't be our bag in that area. Twickenham, £100 per square feet. We'd probably get that thing sold and move on. But everyone has a different strategy. But no, good to see everyone there. There was quite a few ground up network members. P10, who are our finance brokers and accountants, were also there because they're Twickenham based, and some faces that I haven't met before. And we've also recorded some videography with Villator Media. Todd was there running around doing his thing in chinos on a construction site. But that was really good fun. I actually saw quite a few celebs as well driving in and out because of the England rugby tomorrow. I don't know if I mentioned that
Nice.
in Twickenham. So quite cool, actually. Quite a cool day out seeing some celebs and walking around site.
Did you mention that Stu beat us to the bid on this one? Because we did offer on it, didn't we?
Yeah, we did offer on it. We actually tapped out because I think if he had our framework, i.e. we bring a contractor in that makes a margin on the construction, we if we paid the same as Stu, would have probably lost. Well, the margin wouldn't have been as attractive for our metrics that we need to hit internally.
Yeah.
He's slightly different. He can control the construction. So we would have probably hit 225 in all in construction cost per square foot. And that delta is our margin, right? So that's one benefit that he has running his own construction firm.
Yeah, we did make some money out of it because we did do the measured building survey on this property. So yeah,
we did this. I think this is the one he had a go at me because I was sharing on one of the ground up calls. I was sharing like our margins on our surveys, and he saw it and it was like 54% margin.
That is gross margins, Stu, if you're listening. You know,
yeah,
the net's,
yeah.
The net's
I mean,
a lot less than that. So
he's old school, isn't it? He's Mr. Cash.
He is.
Yeah, I love him to bits. It was really good day out. Sorry I couldn't hang around longer, but yeah, good fun.
Yeah,
and I suppose for listeners out there, if you can get on other people's sites and sort of see how they do things and ideas they come up with, then go do it. You can't. We sometimes silo ourselves in our own projects, and it's good to see what other people do, what other finishes people do. Like I had three recommendations for him. Having walked around his site. One was the kitchen supplier that we used. Two was the I think the screw sockets look crap, so we do screwless sockets. And three, I came up with a legal idea of how he could potentially sell some of the flats and agree a buyback scheme because he didn't want to break the freehold. So even just sharing ideas like that on site. He also had a really cool iPad on the wall where you can check in and check out, which was pretty cool.
Nice. Instead of a site login book.
Yeah, so you just check in and check out on the iPad, which makes it super easy.
Nice.
Which is pretty cool.
Like that. I mean, in terms of site tours, you sort of touched on it there. Good segue to the sort of consultancy and the education stuff that we operate. We run site tours ourselves 2 to 3 times a year. If you're interested in visiting one of our sites, we've got 6 sites that we are, finishing off or in the middle of at the moment. So if you want to join our next site tour, comment site tour down below, and we'll get you involved and on the waiting list for that. It's a great way, like Jack says, to see how others operate, ask questions, really drill into some detail. And yeah, it sort of leads me on to our mentoring packages, which we are currently, if you tuned in last week, we're currently revising. You will start to see adverts over the next couple of weeks come out with what opportunities you can have to learn from Jack and I. The packages that you see on screen are current as of today, but we will be reviewing that and the prices will be going up. So if you do want some ad hoc support on your projects, the pricing will be increasing very significantly very shortly. So if you want to get that advice, get it now. So reach out if you've got some really specific business cases that you need some insight on. And last week's episode, I went through a couple of examples where, basically for 300 quid plus VAT last week, I reckon I saved 50 grand for one of our mentees. And that's the type of advice and skill sets that you're tapping into. So if you're interested in working with us, drop us a DM. If you want to come on our site tours and be on our waiting list, then drop a site tour down below in the comments. Cool. Onto a little story around some crypto swindlers. Jack and I, probably about 3 years ago, we had somebody reach out saying they've got investment. They're looking to invest in the UK real estate market. Really good conversations. Looked like they were, exactly the type of people that we want to be involved in. Sent back and forth, non-disclosure agreements. We had various portfolio and cash flow forecasts discussed back and forth, and ultimately we end up going to, flying over at pretty much last minute to Barcelona to meet the investors. Something that we hadn't done before, but the conversations to that point were really good. And we got over there, and fundamentally the first opening kind of conversation that we had with these two guys, or the conversation that they had with us, was that it was all about trust. And you're on the inner circle now, and it all started to get very, very dubious. And ultimately then they started talking about being paid in crypto, and it went very downhill very, very quickly from that point. And we had somebody reach out a couple of weeks ago to our email database, our email address, saying they're a Canadian investment company. They've got a client that they act on behalf of, who is a ultra net worth individual looking to invest in the UK. And it was the perfect fit. They want a 6 to 7% return. They want to invest in low risk assets. In the UK, they've got between £5 and £7 million to deploy. And instantly we're thinking, this is amazing for our social housing portfolio. Sounds absolutely, almost too good to be true. And these things often are when they come in like that. But anyway, the conversation led to, again, non-disclosure agreements, back and forth conversations around what they're looking for, what we have to offer, sent the pitch decks, had the feedback from their analysts internally. My red flags were, my alarm bells were ringing after a few things that they said early on, to the point where it made me then go and check that the investment company in Canada that they're claiming they're from was actually legit. So I reached out to them and said, look, this person has reached out to us. Are they legitimately working on behalf of yourselves? And they came back and confirmed that they were, which was great. And then it got to the point where the final conversation happened. They all wanted to move forward with some investment. They were really happy with what we had to offer. And then the crux of it came to, look, I know you want £5 million. They said, we can raise from our client £5.5 million, and we want you to basically pay us back the £500,000 as our fee. So effectively they wanted a 10% fee, which the investment over a 5-year period works out 2% a year. That's not actually too bad for raising equity at that level. But the issue was that they wanted that £500,000 paid back to them in Bitcoin. And at that point, fundamentally, when I said, well, solicitors are going to have to be involved, there's going to have to be KYC checks, AML checks. I don't really see how this is going to work. And they kept saying, but we'll give you the money and you just give the extra £500,000 back to us. I'm like, well, it's not giving us the money. It's going via solicitors. There'll be shareholding agreements in place. There'll be all sorts of legal stuff that has to happen. I mean, it isn't just as simple as sort of doing what you want to do. And fundamentally, as soon as we said, we can't do this, we can't pay you back in crypto, something just isn't right with this. And he said, well, thanks for your time, but it's not going to work for us. And I guess the message from this is just be really cautious with who you're speaking to. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence checks on investors, that partners that potentially reach out to you. This is the second time this structure has been put to us. Weirdly, both times it's been from a Canadian investment firm. I don't really know what's going on over in Canada that this sort of happens. But just an interesting story that this is the life we're living at the moment with raising capital. You've got to be really careful with who you're jumping into bed with, and watch out for some of these red flags. Cool. Purpose behind personal top companies in your organizational chart or legal structure. Oh, you're on mute, Jack. Jack, you're still on mute.
Sorry?
You're going in and out of mute.
Oh,
You're back
God,
now.
what's going on?
Sorry,
Hello,
you're good now. You're
Jack
good now.
Jiggins.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
Jack
good now.
Jiggins. I live in Henley on Thames. Are you there? Yeah, so this came out twice this week in mentoring sessions. I feel like all of our listeners are getting free mentoring sessions here. So make sure you subscribe and share with someone if you don't want to fork out loads of money for a mentor. But we do more direct growth strategies in mentoring. But anyway, we've talked about this before. It's group structure when you have two directors. And I am partly sharing this because I think it's really valuable. Secondly, sharing this because I talked it through in 2 mentoring sessions, and I can now tell them to come and watch this episode to understand it visually, but also to help our listeners. So if you have a partnership like Ben and I, we're not related. We're not husband and wife. And we do have different lives that we run outside of our businesses. So we may need different things at different times. And what I mean, I'm not talking about a pat on the back or a foot massage. I'm talking about monetary values from the business that can be accumulated via limited companies. And I'm talking about dividends, payment structures, whatever it may be. And if you're watching, it's super easy to see. But if you're listening, I'll try to explain it. If you have a joint venture project like a house that you're flipping, if you own that limited company in your own personal names, when you deliver that project and you pay the corporation tax relative to that limited company, to then get the capital out into your own names, you pay tax on it because you're taking it out of a company. Not only that, if you're a shared director and shareholder, you have to pull it out at the same rate. So if I and Ben did a flip and we made 50 grand each, but it's still in the company and tax has been paid on that, if I wanted 50 grand, Ben has to take out 50 grand as a director's dividend. So therefore, he's forced to pay the relative personal tax on that capital, whether he likes it or not, because I want it out. So this is a similar structure. We're not tax advisors and we're not accountants. So speak to your accountant. If they don't know this structure, get rid of them and get someone that's good. But this is just to give you an indication of how things could be structured, but definitely get sign off via your professionals that you're surrounded by. But anyway, so what Ben and I do have is I have my own limited company. Let's just call it Director One Limited for argument's sake, which I own 100% shares of. Ben also owns his own company, Director 2 Limited, which he also owns 100% of his shares of. Those two middle layer companies are owned separately. So I don't have any interest in Director 2. Ben doesn't have any interest in Director 1. But those limited companies now owning 50-50 of the shareholding structure of the flip that we're doing, whether that's a shared company, SPV, trading company, holding company, whatever it is, there's a degree of separation because it's not the same structure beyond that point. So now let's use the same scenario that there's £100,000 in the SPV. We've paid tax on it as a corporation tax. That £50,000 can be split up into the limited company 50-50 without paying any tax. So we've now split that pot, right? That's the most important part of this story. The pot is split. Ben owns 100% of the company that owns his 50,000. I own 100% of the company that owns my 50,000, and we can then do what we like with it. I could draw it out into my own personal name and pay the tax on it. Ben doesn't have to do that. He could leave it in Director 2, reinvest it, buy some crypto, get a foot massage, do whatever he wants, buy a lease car in the company, and therefore it's a cost of the company, therefore it's offset against potentially paying tax on that, but he gets the benefit. So the point of the matter is you split the capital into new companies. People automatically typically think if you move money from a company below upwards, you pay tax. Believe it or not, you don't. If the same if the structure is done correctly and you've already paid the relative tax in the company that's done the profits, you don't pay tax pulling it up in that way. Again, not tax advisor, speak to your professionals. But this is a really simple way of ensuring that if you do want to do different things at different times in life, I'd say this is probably even more prevalent if you've got a big age gap or I would say culture gap in your partnership. If you're a 24-year-old entrepreneur and you're partnered with a 70-year-old armchair investor, this is probably more important because they may not want to ever pull a dividend. So you're in a position where you can't pull money out because then they're going to pay tax and you're stuck and you want to go out and get a new car or whatever it may be, whatever 24-year-olds do nowadays.
Did you mention that you can still then loan back funds into the main business if you want to? So once it's
I
up
said you
that
can loan it back
direction,
down, or even to even to your own business. Yeah, it makes it super more flexible.
yeah, you can spread those funds around and do what you want.
Yeah.
Cool, good stuff. Hopefully that's good nugget of information. On to point number 8. In December last year, we brought on a new digital marketing guy into Aura and XP Surveys. He's splitting his time sort of between the two and other bits and bobs. But fundamentally, in Aura this month, we've had a significant number of leads come in over the last January, February, and realistically, our team is struggling to cope with dealing with the leads. Our conversion rate historically just hasn't been good enough, and this is really important for those that do run service-based businesses. There's 5 different elements of a business. There's marketing, sales, operations, finance, and talent. HR, your team, effectively, and all of them do need to be working in tandem. At the moment, we're in a position where, from a marketing perspective, I think we're actually doing a really good job, and we are pulling in a good number of leads. Some of them are on the lower side of sort of the level of quality, but we're still getting good levels of higher, £500,000 contract type projects, which is a really, really good project for us for Aura. So we're now sort of trying to streamline the sales process of the business, because ultimately with when you've got loads of leads coming in like this, if you've got a leaky bucket where the sales aren't converting, there's no point in plugging loads more money into the marketing if you haven't plugged those holes in the bucket and ultimately got the right sales process in place. So I'm looking for to hire someone potentially on a part-time basis. Somebody that probably only needs to do 2 hours a day, but has some architectural, some property, some relevant construction experience, understands the industry, understands residential projects, house extensions, loft conversions, basements, new builds, and potentially working with some developers. And wants to work with a forward-thinking, really ambitious architectural practice that does fantastic projects, to get on the phones, to get on the emails, to get on our CRM, which is based in Zoho, and help me or help our team manage those leads coming in. We want our architects to be focusing on the high quality project leads that come in. But there's lots of, we have almost 150 leads in our Zoho CRM that need attention. And even if we convert 10% of those 150 leads, that's a huge amount of business that we could be generating for Aura. And for those that have tuned in over the last year, it's been a difficult time for Aura in terms of revenue in the business, profitability in the business. But we are getting good inquiries. So I need somebody to help convert those inquiries into sales. So if you know somebody, or you're listening yourself, and they've got some sales experience, they've got some experience working in the architectural space, I'd love to have a chat with you. So if you want to DM me on any platform that you're tuning in, then I would love to speak to you. We will be putting out some adverts on Indeed and LinkedIn very shortly to try and drum up a bit of interest for this. And I just noticed, I think the girls that I sent this ChatGPT image from said that one of the ladies in the image has 2 thumbs, which I didn't even notice, but that seems to be what AI does for you every now and again. But yeah, we're looking for a part-time sales assistant in Aura, and if you're interested, drop me a message.
From the pitfalls of AI to the successes of AI.
Yeah.
This is a little cottage that we own. And essentially, the neighboring property has been, believe it or not, in construction for 37 years, which is this little fence that you can see in the photo if you're watching. But anyway, before the last sort of, I let it a year ago. So I had a full marketing suite of photos that I took a year ago. But the front kind of let itself down because he had tarped it all over. He had an ugly sign and it was graffitied on as well. So it made our cute little Henley cottage look like shit, really. So because I saw his lovely little fence cladding, I thought, I'll tell you what, I'm going to get a new front shot. And that is what I took on the left. It looks even more miserable because of the weather. And yes, at the beginning of the call, I said I think we've had most consecutive days of rain, which I constantly get reminded by my fair-weathered wife. It just looks terrible, and you're not going to let that property. So I just thought I'll see what ChatGPT does, if I'm honest. And I just put a little prompt into ChatGPT. I said, can you make it blue skies and keep the property as it is designed, but just make it look a little bit brighter. And what we ended up with is on the right. And the fact that you can now do that, one prompt, the fact that you can now do that that was on the free version of ChatGPT, and it took like 30 seconds. It's just incredible, like absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like literally putting photo editors, CGI generation people out of business like you wouldn't believe. And it's actually better than the previous photo I took. The skies were blue and it looks really good, but it still doesn't look as good as that. So yeah, crazy. I talked about it with our flip that we're doing in Central Suites a few weeks ago, and it's just crazy how good it's getting at the video editing.
Yeah, I've even just noticed, like, look on the left hand side of this poll, it's also like built out the side of the property.
Don't say too much, because it's got to be a like.
That's enough
for marketing purposes. Yeah, I actually took the photo at a different angle.
Yeah, it is insane what it can do. So yeah, I do fear for CGI artists and photographers when it can do stuff like this. Cool. On to other stuff. We have a Xero referral bonus. If you don't use Xero accounting software to manage your businesses, then you are missing out. And you can get 90% off for 6 months using the bit.ly link down below. You can also get 15% off Dext, which is a plugin to Xero that allows you to upload invoicing and receipts. It used to be called Receipt Bank. It's now called Dext. And basically that then sort of AI reads the receipt, connects it to the appropriate Xero bank transaction, and just speeds up that reconciliation process, which is amazing. So you can get 15% off Dext as well via the links down below. Cool. On to some Q&A stuff. Jace, thanks as always for tuning in. We're going way back when now. Looks like he's been basically watching every single episode that we've ever done, because we are now at season 1, episode 5 as part of this question. And he says, hi guys, what did you get those 5 agent valuations after you were under offer? Was the GDV you went under offer on based purely on your own due diligence, and then you obtained agent valuations pre-exchange and re-offered when needed once they came back lower? So I don't know exactly what you're talking about, because I haven't looked. It's 23 minutes and 27 seconds into that episode, and we'll have to go back. But I imagine this probably isn't any different to what we would normally do, right, in terms of getting agent valuations. We would rarely ever go to the level of getting 5 agent valuations before we make an offer, right? We would always get that offer on, try and sit, like we've spoken about numerous times, about just securing the deal before.
We'd much rather run. We actually did an asset. I've shared in an episode. I have to dig it out, Jose, but it's an asset test where we're like, at the point of where you should commit more time, you go through much more detailed research. You have to remember that valuations, unless you're literally building or creating something that's already just been created and built and sold, is opinion. Until something is sold, everything's opinion. So it's to try and narrow down the most accurate way that you can measure that. And the more opinions you have, the more accurate the data will be. If you have 10 people that give a perspective, the middle of the ground is probably more likely to be accurate than speaking to 3 people and doing the same result. But yeah, we typically do as much. The classic case, it depends. We've had sites which are really easy to value, like that cottage that was just in that last photo. If one came available next door, I could give you a value now that I can guarantee would be within 5% of valuation. If you built a block of 20 flats there, I wouldn't have a clue, because there's not many flats in Henley. So the cottage, I don't need to do a lot of work to get it comfortably under offer and to narrow down that range. Whereas something new and something different, or something unique, or something in the sticks, or something that's an ugly building, you're going to have to do a lot more work and get a lot more opinions and factual data as best you can. So it depends on the scheme, on how much work you put in when. I'm not a massive fan of going to agents until something's under offer. If I think it's a risky site and our GDV is significantly off, I will go to that work before we put an offer forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Nice. Hopefully that's helpful. Next question. Do you know of any lenders that would allow a 2-stage facility where I can initially borrow up to 75% loan to value of the auction purchase price and then access a further advance once the works are completed and the property is marketed in order to release additional capital? I don't know if this is a thing anymore. Like when I bought my first property 15 years ago, I did this with Halifax. I bought on I think a Halifax mortgage. I did some works to convert the property from a 1-bed to a 2-bed. And then I got a further advance on the same mortgage of, whatever it was, 30 grand extra money, just because of the value that I'd added. I don't know if this is a thing anymore. I mean, we've even had to the point where it's been very challenging even to move from a bridging loan to a development facility on the same site. There's a lot of moving parts when you're looking to do this. You've got revaluations. You're going to have a evaluation before, evaluation after. There'll be legal costs involved with kind of redoing various facilities. So to my knowledge, I can't think of anyone that does offer that type of facility. But Jack sort of sees this more than I do. So have you seen anyone that offers that type of thing?
That there will be. I would highly recommend going for a boutique lender. I would also potentially look at bridging lender. So I'm guessing this is going to be a straight 70% LTV bridge that you buy through auction. A lot of those bridging lenders do a heavy or light refurbishment or development stuff, and it will be the same firm, same funds, same lawyers, slightly different underwriting and valuation process. So Jimmy, potentially look at just actually, if you are going to do works to the property to sell them, potentially look at actually just getting a refurbishment product. So you buy with 70% LTV, you fund the first part of build, but it gets drawn down in arrears through the development facility. And then you're actually just staying on one product. Same cost. Most bridging and dev terms are the same. Most in and out fees are the same. The myth of bridging being loads quicker is not really true anymore. I think that most bridging lenders are doing dev stuff anyway. I would say, in addition to that, there are some boutique lenders who would be happy to reval and lend you more once practically complete or finished. Obviously, that comes at a cost because you've got to get a revaluation and a further draw. I would be amazed if any lender releases more once it's finished, unless you get a reval, because market conditions, market changes, how you've done the finish, what is it actually worth. But yeah, I'd probably try and push to be on one product or exit bridge out, like you say, because there's some really quite aggressive terms out there for exit bridging. Is typically cheaper than bridging and development. So you're then getting rid of a cost of capital that's higher because it's taken the risk through the construction or structural works or the purchase or whatever it may be. And you're rekindling it with something that's lower risk. You finished. So it should be a lower finance costs.
Yeah, I guess going back to the original intent of the question, when would you need to do this? Because if the project's finished and you've done the work, you're either selling it or you're refinancing it onto a commercial long-term mortgage. So, is it just a case of Jimmy maybe wanting to save a few percentage points by moving from a bridge, which might be more expensive, to something that is less less expensive? Or is it more about getting that money back on the same bridge? I guess it's maybe that. It's keeping on the same bridge, but getting some more money because you've added value with your own cash. Yeah, difficult.
Well, a benefit to exit bridging for developers out there is you can actually take some capital through the sales process. So you might be able to keep 20% of the sale value of a flat. If you're on a development product, that isn't how it works. You typically have to pay that back in full before you realize any value. So that is a benefit for a development.
Cool. Nice. Well, we've come to the end of this week's episode. If you got value, please make sure you like it. Click that button before you sign off, and follow, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And we will see you guys next week.